Tell someone you just bought a brand new Aston, Ferrari, or Cadillac, and they'll think, damn, man, you're a baller. Well, not necessarily. You might have bought one of their low-cost models for the poorer masses. Yeah, those do exist too. Hey guys, Stipe here with a list of 7 surprisingly cheap cars from otherwise expensive brands. Let's do this thing. And before you ask, yes, I will be talking about the Signet again. Number 7, Maserati by Turbo. If you're over 1,000 years old, you might remember Maserati's glory days. Back when Mr. Ferrari and Lamborghini were still in their father's ball sacks, Masi brothers were the GOAT. And although the pastures weren't always green for this Italian car maker, if you owned one of their cars, it meant your pastures looked like that Windows XP wallpaper. That is until the early 1980s when the bosses at Maserati had a weird idea. Wouldn't it be more profitable to stop making Grand Tourers and supercars and instead make a cheaper 4-seater compact for the masses? Well, it would, but not with this. Not with the Bi-Turbo. Ugh! It was like a BMW 3 Series, only smaller, and at $26,000 in 1981, nowhere near as expensive as Maserati buyers were used to. Mind you, those buyers weren't used to seeing plastic Fiat switches or pressed steel for the body either. Maseratis used to be hand-sculpted from aluminum, but such craftsmanship comes at a price. Now, the Bi-Turbo might have stood a chance if it were not for this. No, not the twin-turbo badge, the twin-turbo engine. This was a first for any road car ever, but it was so rushed and underdeveloped that it ended up being less reliable than a betting tip from a fortune teller. Strapping 2 spinny boys onto an already outdated Citroen V6 with carburetors meant it was overheating like a tea kettle. That is, if you could even start the damn thing in the first place. Number 6, Audi 50. You might not know this because cheap Audis were mostly sold in Europe, but yeah man, there was more than just one. There was a super mini A1, the innovative and quirky A2, and then there was one almost nobody knew ever existed, the 1974 Audi 50. Yes, it's an old car from a time when girls were bushy and the fuel was scarce, and if you're thinking, hey, that looks like a Golf, well, yes, it does. It was essentially the first-gen VW Golf, shrunken down. And Audi really thought that by doing that, they were about to drop something as innovative and as legendary as the original Mini. They didn't. The problem was, because it was an Audi, it wasn't exactly poverty spec. It still came with enough optional extras as standard to make it just slightly more expensive than the bigger VW brother, which in turn made it hard to sell. And besides, Audi had no business encroaching onto Volkswagen's turf with an economy hatchback like that, especially since they were now owned by VW. So it was decided to promote Audi into a more innovative-driven premium brand for bigger cars only, and the tiny 50 would be stripped down and turned into a VW Polo. Granted, they did give 50 a chance, but after 4 years on sale, it was clear that the cheaper Polo was a much better seller, and well, that was the end of that. Hey, it was the right car for the right time, it just had the wrong badge. Number 5, Cadillac Cimarron. The 1970s were a rough time for Cadillac too. Between the oil crisis, stricter emission standards, downsizing, and then a deluge of sportier, more compact rivals from Germany, it was no wonder that they were in a panic mode. Cadillac needed a sporty compact car too, and they needed it yesterday. But instead of flexing their engineering powers and designing such a car from scratch, they looked at the Chevy Cavalier, you know, the most basic, uninspired rental spec sedan in the GM fleet, and said, yeah, that'll do. Sure, they slapped some leather on the seats, added a bit of extra chrome, and tried to cover the shame with enough Cadillac logos, but that hardly fooled anyone.
I don't believe you.
So this so-called Cimarron sold well below expectations, which was expected by everyone except Cadillac's board of idiots. Look, you can't just throw some cowhide in a budget Chevy and expect it to be refined. It's like putting a tuxedo on Post Malone. Not exactly the next James Bond, if you know what I mean. And as for the sportiness, well, it was a Chevy Cavalier with its front-wheel drive, its handling abilities, and a 4-cylinder engine producing a whopping 88 cries for help. It was such a pitiful failure of a car that 10 years later, the product director at Cadillac hung a photo of the Cimarron on his office wall as a reminder of what not to do ever again.
Not now, not ever. Never, never, never!
And to think that Cadillac used to mean the best in class.
Best of all, it's a Cadillac.
Okay, number 4, Porsche C88. In 1994, Porsche was in a bit of a financial pickle, so when the Chinese government invited all manufacturers to design them a people's car for the masses, Porsche was like, hold my schnitzel! Fast forward just 4 months later, and this is what they came up with, the C88. And before you ask, no, the C doesn't stand for Carrera, it stands for China, while the 88 is a lucky number in Chinese culture. Damn, man, not even John Cena was sucking up so hard.
我爱更尊重中国更中国人。
Anyway, tractors aside, this is probably the slowest Porsche ever made. The engine was a puny 1.1 little boxer with just 48 horsepower, meaning it could do 0 to 60 in... eventually. But the driving engagement wasn't a requirement here, and looking like that, it seems that the design wasn't either. No, now what really mattered was that it was cheap to make and cheap to buy, and with more plastic than a Tupperware convention, plus just $8,000 asking price. $8K for a new Porsche? The C88 had everything it needed to be a success. But in the classic double-cross move, the Chinese government looked at the prototype, said, thanks for the ideas, and then canceled the whole program without giving anyone a contract.
Don't trust China. China is asshole.
Now, because the C88 lacked Porsche badges, Porsche speed, Porsche design language, and was ultimately a failure, you'd think that they'd be embarrassed to ever talk about it, but no. Instead, it is proudly displayed in their Porsche museum together with all their other crazy stuff. And you know what? Big respect for that. Number 3, Mercedes A-Class. From the first car ever made to about 1995, Mercedes was best known for building cars primarily for the rich. What is less known, however, is that for much of the time they really wanted to build cheap, small cars for us dirty peasants too. Like, check out this dystopian-looking 1981 Naverken Fahrzeug or NAFA concept. Then the 190E compact study, the FCC concept, the Vision A93, and then finally, in 1996, the first production A-Class. I like that they shortened the name a little bit. It wasn't big or luxurious, you don't say, but it was still jam-packed with innovative ideas, as one would expect from Mercedes. The goal was to offer as much space as an S-Class in nearly half the length using the good old German engineering. And guess what? It ended up being even roomier. Mercedes managed that by moving the wheels to the outermost corners and placing a double floor between them. Sandwiched in there were the battery, the gas tank, the ECU, a bunch of mechanical parts, and who knows what else. They even reshaped the engine into a wedge so it would slide between the floors in the event of a crash. It was truly clever. And despite that infamous moose test mishap, which was quickly addressed, this small Merc was a big hit in Europe. There was even a second generation with sharper lines and a nicer interior. But turns out, the more expensive, more premium hatchbacks from Audi and BMW were still selling better. And well, Mercedes too went where the money was. Can we really blame them?
I don't blame you.
Number 2, Ferrari 208 GT4. Ferrari also wanted to make a cheaper high-volume model, but they weren't exactly too thrilled about the prospect of it ruining the prestigious Ferrari name. So they did what any insecure luxury brand does and formed a new entry-level sub-brand. The Ferrari badge would be reserved only for series machines with V12 engines, while anything lesser would fall under this new Dino brand. One such lesser car was the Dino 308 GT4, a 4-seater supercar with a V8 in the middle and a design that was clearly not done by Pininfarina. Seriously, it looks like a glorified doorstop. But let's not talk about the way it looks. Instead, let me tell you what happened soon after it went on sale. The Italian government got greedy and slapped a massive 38% sales tax on any car with an engine larger than 2 liters. Sure, the V12 buyers could probably stomach that, but for those in the market for a much more affordable Dino, that tax increase would cost them an extra arm and a leg, maybe a kidney too. I'm just guessing here, I don't really know what used organs market was like in 1970s Italy. Anyway, to stop the plummeting sales, Ferrari came up with a simple tax-evasive solution. They just shrank its engine down to 2 liters. Yeah, the power shrank too, but that didn't matter. This Italy-only Dino 208 was offered for just 7.5 million lira, which, in today's money, is about 66 grand. That's Nissan Z money. Who would pass on a deal like that?
Damn good deal.
It is, simply put, the cheapest ever Ferrari. Or Dino? Whichever, or whatever, because it's time for some honorable mentions now. Can you guess these cheap cars from expensive brands? Yes? No? Let me know down in the comments and check your work and mark other people's answers wrong for sure. But first, it's time for number 1, Aston Martin's Signet. Oh, I'm rubbing my chest area. It's weird that I talk about it now. When you walk into an Aston dealership, you're expecting big engines, bigger price tags, and enough British class to make the King Sausage Fingers look like a peasant. You're not expecting to see this. It's a Toyota or Scion IQ. No, I'm not joking. Aston Martin literally took a tiny 3-cylinder Japanese microcar, swapped the bumpers, covered the interior in expensive leather, and slapped some wing badges on it. But why? Because James Bond suddenly needed a car he could park inside a bathtub? No, it was all because of European emissions regulations. The EU told Aston that their average fleet emissions were too high. Well, no shit, and unless they lowered it, there would be a hefty fine to pay. But expecting a niche manufacturer such as Aston Martin to develop a whole new green engine was as realistic as expecting Sydney Sweeney to answer your DMs. It's not gonna happen. So instead, Aston just stuck their name on a tiny 1.3-liter Toyota and got out of the jail for free. Except they didn't. To balance the emissions numbers, 4,000 Signets had to be sold, but the final number was just 300.
This is the worst.
Ouch. Problem is, it was offered only to the existing Aston buyers. Like a jet ski for their Aston yacht, but at 50 grand? No, not a chance. Even later, when the existing buyer's restriction was lifted, hardly anyone was dumb enough to bite that expensive bullet. In the end, there was nothing else to do than to give up and just pay the damn fine. Shit, man, no wonder Aston can never turn a profit. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about this topic. Go watch something else now. Hopefully it's from Top Cars TV, and I'll see you in the next one. And I will always love... Oh, I dropped my peanuts on the floor. Peanuts! Internet, you have gotten perverted.